It is the dirtiest of fossil fuels, pushing up global temperatures, the power of the past. Only here, it's not just in the past. So this is it, the proposed site for the UK's first new coal mine in 30 years. The coal they plan to dig up here won't be used to heat homes, it'll be used for making steel. From those who for years have been protesting and saying, not here, not anywhere, there is anger and disbelief. The decision, they say, is indefensible, undermining the UK's claims to be a world leader on tackling climate change, at odds, as they see it, with the promises from this government that the end of coal is in sight.
We can't go ahead with approving a mine that's going to undermine our ability to meet climate targets and create more emissions. We need to consign coal to the history books.
The areas we're looking at here are some of the most deprived areas within our borough. And those communities are the ones that led us to support this. They were the ones that saying, yes, we want this. I mean, coal mining is in the DNA of this community.
Deputy Mayor and leader of the Conservatives on Copeland Council, David Moore talks about the hundreds of jobs promised and on his own party's carbon-cutting promises, the claims that last year's COP had sounded a death knell for coal. They're not at odds, as he sees it, with today's decision.
So we need steel, and this coking coal is just what is needed for those furnaces. And that's why we tried to make that definition between coal and coking coal. Two very different things, two different values, two different minerals.
Both huge polluters, emitting huge amounts of carbon when they're burned, though.
Well, they all emit a carbon, but there's a carbon footprint to everything.
This evening's announcement that the mine has been approved comes a day after the U-turn on wind farms, clearing the way for onshore sites in England. And on the same day, COP15 on biodiversity opens in Montreal. Those opposed to the decision say it's not the end. They will look at more legal options. For some, though, mining is part of the fabric of this place, and they welcome its return.
West Cumbria mining joined the fray. Coking coal is another day. Mining is about a way of life. It's about a system that's been lost to this country.
Well, although this decision has been long awaited and was actually postponed a number of times, it's only actually come through in the last hour. That's when it was published with the reasons that are being given by Secretary of State Michael Gove. And in those reasons, if I just give you a little of the detail, it points out that this coal will be used in the production of steel, which it says would otherwise need to be imported, although that is a contested claim because some British steel makers have said that actually they will continue to import coal because this won't be the exact makeup that they need. But all the same, the Secretary of State saying that there is a need for this and stressing that he says that this does not go against the commitments that have been made in terms of net zero. But reaction is coming in thick and fast this evening, including from Greenpeace. Let me just read you some of what they say. They say that the UK government risks becoming a superpower in climate hypocrisy rather than climate leadership. I think we can expect more like that over the coming hours.
Claire Fallon. Well, joining me now from Parliament is Mark Jenkinson, the Conservative MP for Workington in Cumbria, the region where the mine would be sited, and you've been a supporter of this project. Your colleagues, Alok Sharma, making it clear this is bad for our carbon budgets, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for Britain's reputation. 85% of the coal would be for export. Why do you think it is worth all that damage?
So I'll just point out that it is in the neighbouring constituency of Trudy Harrison. But, of course, the Planning Inspectorate, I welcomed this planning inquiry because it enabled us to have an adult conversation about our ongoing need for coking coal well into the future, well past 2050. And I was delighted to see the Planning Inspector's report make those very same arguments to the Secretary of State and for him to accept them. The fact is that we imported 1 million tonnes of coking coal last year, half of which came from Russia. There is absolutely no sense. I mean, it's an abdication of our climate commitments.
But that's all stopped now, hasn't it? We're not importing coal from Russia anymore.
No, we're importing it from everywhere else instead. I mean, it's still an application of our climate commitments, shipping this stuff across the world when we have an ongoing need for this, as recognised by the planning inspector, well into the future and probably well past 2050.
Yeah, but of the 2 plants in Britain, one of them almost certainly won't be able to use this because of its sulphur content, and the other one's only got 1 furnace. I mean, are we really opening a new coal mine for 1 furnace at Port Talbot?
That's simply not true. That's a misrepresentation of what was written in a planning submission back to Cumbria County Council about the level of sulphur, the maximum level of sulphur, not the actual level of sulphur, the maximum level of sulphur.
Well, even Alok Sharma says they won't necessarily use much of the coal.
I'm not going to get into Alok Sharma's arguments because he doesn't know what the steel industry will and won't use. I, of course, have met steel industry executives and discussed this mine with them as well in my role on the Bayes Select Committee. So, I mean, with the greatest of respect, the coal markets will decide who buys this coal, which of course will come at a premium simply because, from the UK, simply because we're not paying to ship it across the world. I mean, you know, we can make all the misrepresentations we like. The facts were laid out in the planning inquiry, accepted by the planning inspector. He recognised that the only expert to give evidence on the metallurgical coal market was one put forward by the applicant. All the other arguments had absolutely no basis at all.
This is such sort of, you know, dinosaur technology. The future of
dinosaur
steelmaking is hydrogen and electric. It's not coal.
No, Christian, we cannot make steel using hydrogen. We can make the iron, the direct reduced iron that goes in an electric arc furnace. We then add coking coal. No one in the world has yet created steel without coking coal on a commercial basis. Your hybrid in Sweden adds coking coal, much reduced, so that we're using a blast furnace, for example, where we're also removing the oxygen from the iron ore. But the fact is that even electric arc furnaces require coking coal.
Isn't it just embarrassing for Britain?
It's
in
not
its climate leadership to be opening a new
Tell you what
coal
would be
mine.
embarrassing.
That's why all the climate leaders were against it.
What is embarrassing for Britain is importing 1 million tonnes of a critical mineral, as recognised by the European Union, from countries across the world that have significantly lower standards than we do.
Okay.
That's what would be embarrassing.
Mark Jenkinson, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, only yesterday, the Green Party MP, Caroline Lucas, was tweeting a welcome to the news of the government's U-turn on onshore wind development. But she also warned that if it was meant to buy off giving the green light to the Cumbria coal mine, it would be totally and utterly shameless. She is one of those leading voices against this, but she's not the only one because she's joined by many Conservative MPs who are also very concerned about this and who were part of Boris Johnson's push on net zero for Britain's leadership of the COP26 summit, much of which has been dropped. And of course, Alok Sharma, who I was quoting in that interview with Mark Jenkinson, was dropped by Rishi Sunak from his cabinet. Well, we are hoping to speak to Caroline Lucas any minute. She's just getting all her sound equipment wired in. And Caroline, I hope you can hear me. And you will have heard Mark Jenkinson there and all his arguments saying, well, you're all wrong. The fact is we need coking coal. At the moment, we import it. It makes eminent sense to dig it up ourselves. Why is he wrong?
Well, he's wrong, first of all, because 85% of the coal from this new mine would be exported anyway. It's going to become a stranded asset within years of actually being dug, because we know that in Europe, where we are exporting this to, they're already shifting to hydrogen and arc furnaces, electric arc furnaces as a way forward. So the steel industry doesn't want this. British Steel is absolutely on record by saying that the sulphur content of this mine is far too high to be useful. So the coal, the steel industry doesn't need it, and it's going to so totally undermine any kind of climate credibility we might hope to have.
Well, you heard what
I've been
Mark
on your
Jenkinson
programme
said. He said
so
that
many
was
times,
wrong.
Christian, and talking about how important it is that we act and we walk the talk when it comes to climate. I have never been as desperate as I feel right now. What we're seeing is nothing less, I think, than a climate crime against humanity. This is basically giving a green light not just for a coal mine in the UK, but undermining all of the work that we've been doing on the international stage, all of the work that people like Alok Sharma have been doing to be persuading other countries not to go back to dirty coal. If we're going to do it, we have no credibility at all. This is a desperate decision for the UK today.
I mean, you say it's a climate crime. I mean, I guess people will say, well, is that hyperbole when developing world countries, India, China, are opening coal mines all the time? You know, are they all climate crimes?
No, because we've got alternatives and they don't, and we've been doing this for a hell of a lot longer than they have, and we are cumulatively more responsible for the climate emissions in the atmosphere. We like to think of ourselves as a climate leader. We have been through the dirty industrialised programme. We're supposed to be out the other end showing climate leadership. That is why this is so important, because all of those other countries that you've just cited can now point at the UK and say, if you, the sixth richest country in the world, are going to go ahead and say that we need more coal, then where does that leave any of the kind of climate rhetoric we've had to date?
And briefly, I mean, what about the jobs? There are hundreds of jobs dependent on this, and probably more in the wider economy.
Chris, there have been so much evidence to suggest that if you did a shift to a greener economy, you could get up to 9,000 jobs in this region, not the 500 jobs that the mine might secure for a short period of time. So from the perspective of jobs, from the perspective of getting our fuel bills down, from the perspective of getting green steel, being ahead of the curve when it comes to the new industries of the future, that is why this is such a devastating decision and absolutely sets back any kind of sense of the UK being a climate leader by decades, if not completely.
Caroline Lucas, many thanks.